Hey everybody, welcome back to Draven's Den. I'm your host Stan. If this is your first time listening, this is the show where we slow history down, stretch it out, and remind ourselves that just like life, the past wasn't lived in neat chapters. It was messy, it was uncertain, and most of the time, people had no idea what kind of moment they were stepping in. Today's episode covers January 14th through January 16th, the stretch of the month where the calendar insists you're settled in, but your brain absolutely disagrees. January is fully entered into its this is just life now phase. The decorations are gone. The motivation is negotiable. And history, once again, is here to remind us that humans have never handled the middle part of anything particularly well. Gotta love that word. All right. Before I get into it, though, I posted something on Facebook yesterday. I mean, every now and again, I get these brain explosions, and I just start thinking about stuff. And I want to share this post with you because I think it's pretty impactful for a lot of people. So let me just read it. So some folks will never let you outrun your past, even when you've outgrown it. What people often forget is that mistakes rarely come from nowhere. Sometimes they're the result of depression you couldn't name yet. Struggles you didn't have the words for. Battles you were fighting quietly while trying to look fine on the outside. It's easy for others to hold someone to their lowest moment. It's harder to understand what pain or pressure created it, and what it took to crawl out of it. If you see someone trying to rebuild, trying to do better, trying to choose a healthier path, don't be the voice that drags them backward. Be the one who acknowledges the climb. Be the one who understands growth is real, but the one who lets people move forward. We're all human. We've all stumbled. Some of us just had to stumble in public. Grace costs nothing, but it can change a life. Now, I got mostly positive response from that. I got a couple of negative, apparently soapboxes are free. But no, and you know what? I'm not going to just let that one drop. Soapboxes are free because all the history that I've talked about over the weeks in regards to the United States, all of that was part of building our freedom of speech. We all have opinions. We're all allowed to voice them, and I think we should. That's a good thing. But, a lot of those opinions aren't received well. They do damage, sometimes irreparable damage. And just be careful, You got to pick and choose your battles. It's fine to not say something. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. All right, let's get into it today. January 14th opens with one of those moments where bravery and brutality exist in the same breath. On January 14, 1748, the United States ratified the Treaty of Paris, officially ending the American Revolutionary War. On paper, it was the beginning of peace, independence, and self-governance. In practice, it was chaos with better branding. The war was over, but the country was broke, divided, and immediately unsure what freedom was supposed to look like. Veterans returned home to unpaid wages. Loyalists fled. Native nations were ignored entirely in the negotiations. History loves to celebrate endings, but most endings are just reorganized problems. January 14th also reminds us that survival isn't always heroic. Sometimes it's just stubborn. In 1911, a British expedition reached the South Pole only to realize they were too late. Roald Amundsen, sorry guys, I practiced that name, had already beaten them there. Captain Robert Falcon Scott and his team, they turned back, exhausted and undersupplied. None of them survived the return journey. Scott's final journal entries weren't dramatic. They were practical. He wrote about weather, supplies, and concern for the families back home. Even at the edge of the world, facing the end, he stayed focused on responsibility. History remembers the race. It should remember the restraint. And on a much lighter note, January 14th is also the birthday of Faye Dunaway. A reminder that confidence, when applied correctly, can carry you through chaos, and when applied incorrectly, can still make for excellent cinema. January 15th carries weight whether you notice it or not. It's the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., born in 1929. His words are quoted so often that they risk becoming decorative, stripped of the discomfort they were meant to cause. Dr. King didn't speak in vague hope. He spoke in demands. His speeches weren't polite requests for patience. They were structured arguments aimed directly at systems that preferred calm over justice. History often tries to soften figures like King, sanding down the edges so they better fit on posters. But real progress rarely comes from comfort. It comes from people willing to be inconvenient at the right moment. January 15th also marks the opening of the Pentagon in 1943. It was built in just 16 months, an architectural response to urgency during World War II. Speed mattered. Efficiency mattered. What didn't matter was aesthetics. The Pentagon is famously confusing to navigate, which feels appropriate. History often builds fast and figures out the consequences later. And because history enjoys contrast, January 15th is also when Wikipedia launched in 2001, an experiment in collective knowledge that many experts dismissed outright. Turns out, letting everyone contribute doesn't destroy truth. It just reveals how much work truth actually requires. January 16th is a masterclass in persistence. On January 16, 1920, Prohibition officially went into effect in the United States. Alcohol was banned, morality was legislated, and Americans immediately began ignoring it. Instead of ending drinking, Prohibition professionalized it. Organized crime flourished. Unsafe alcohol killed thousands. And the government learned, slowly and painfully, that laws without public buy-in are just expensive suggestions. History doesn't punish bad ideas immediately. It lets them run along enough to leave a paper trail. January 16th is also the birthday of Joan of Arc, born into a world that had no place for her certainty. She led armies as a teenager, challenged kings, and changed the course of a war, and was executed for it. Centuries later, though, she was declared a saint. History has a strange habit of apologizing too late. And finally, January 16th marks the birth of comedian and actor Jenny Finch. Sorry, wrong genre. Comedian? No? Nothing? Okay. But it feels right because January 16th is also Elvis Presley's influence echoing through pop culture just days after his birthday earlier this month. Elvis didn't invent rock and roll. He amplified it. He absorbed influence from black musicians who were ignored by mainstream radio and brought that sound to audiences who would have never heard it otherwise. History remembers the face. It should remember the roots. Mid-January is where optimism goes to quietly sit down. In colonial America, January was so associated with failure that some towns refused to schedule court cases during it, believing juries were harsher and judges were more irritable. This wasn't superstition. It was seasonal depression before the name existed. In mid-January 1973, NASA discovered that astronauts were sneaking comfort foods into space missions, including sandwiches that caused crumbs to float into equipment. Officially banned, quietly continued. Even in space, rules are suggestions. January is also when most medieval kings historically fell ill. Not because January was cursed, but because winter diets were terrible, and doctors believed bathing weakened the body. History doesn't survive because people were smart. It survived because people were stubborn. Man, can I relate to that. That's my life story right in a nutshell. I didn't survive because I was smart. I survived because I was stubborn. Before we move on, there's something January wants you to believe, and history would like to object. January is lying to you. By the middle of the month, January insists you should be locked in by now. Routines established, energy stabilized, momentum building. If you're not there yet, it quietly suggests you're behind. Historically, that's nonsense. Mid-January has always been the point where humans realize optimism showed up early and left without leaving instructions. This is when plans start rubbing up against reality. When winter stops being novel and starts being logistical. Empires didn't expand in January. They paused. Expeditions stalled. Courts delayed rulings. Even record keeping from this part of the year shows more corrections, amendments, and we'll visit this later notes than almost any other time. January doesn't reward clarity. It tests endurance. So if you're still adjusting, still tired, or still renegotiating expectations, that's not a personal failure. That's historically accurate behavior. January isn't asking for perfection. It's asking whether you'll keep showing up anyway. January doesn't measure progress. It measures persistence. Before we close things out, I want to level with you. The Lore Trail Kickstarter wrapped up, and it didn't cross the finish line. That's not a dramatic failure. It's a quiet one. The kind where you look at the numbers, take a breath, and realize the idea still exists even if the momentum didn't show up on schedule. That happens more often than history likes to admit. Lore Trail was never meant to be a one-shot gamble. It was an experiment in how we connect people to place, memory, and stories that don't live in textbooks. That work doesn't disappear just because one chapter didn't land. So this isn't an ending. It's a recalibration. The project is still alive, still evolving, and still being shaped. It may move differently now. It may move and grow slower, but the foundation hasn't cracked. If you backed it, shared it, or even rolled your eyes and listened anyway, you were part of the process. That counts more than you think. History isn't built by things that succeed immediately. It's built by the things people refuse to quietly abandon. I'm still here. Lore Trail is still here. We're just taking a different route. Now, if you recall, I keep asking for write-ins. And if your family has a story, something strange, meaningful, or almost forgotten, I want to hear it. Immigration journeys, survival stories, traditions that don't make sense unless you live them. Send them to me at dravensden@gmail.com. Or you can shoot me a message over at the Facebook page, Draven's Den Podcast. You don't have to write it perfectly. History never shows up polished. Mid-January doesn't care how motivated you were last week. It asks what you're willing to carry forward anyway. If you're tired, late, or quietly renegotiating your expectations, congratulations. You're not failing. You're participating. Thank you for spending part of your day here in the Den. I'm Stan, and that's a wrap.